Alright, so the last trip out, we were in southern Arkansas for about a week and a half over Thanksgiving, and it got kind of cold, down into the 20s a few times, and so we ran this thing pretty much all the time. It's got a little heater in it, and it works great for just taking the chill out of the air inside of the rig. But about 3-4 days in, it started to squeak really quietly, maybe like a, I don't know, a mouse with emphysema, but it was enough where I could hear it, and it annoyed me. So while we were there and using just my Leatherman as a Phillips screwdriver, I took the thing apart and determined what was going on and figured out how to lubricate the squeak. But it was rather interesting getting into this thing, and the mechanism that they use to make this all function is pretty interesting as well. And there's also, I think, a modification that can be done to the case to make future lubrication much, much simpler. And so I'm going to show you today is how to remove this, and then next how it works. I'll take it apart to show you all the internals of it. But then I'm going to show you where you can probably make a couple of modifications to this thing in order to be able to lubricate it much more simply and effectively in the future without having to do a whole bunch of extra work. So the first thing you got to do is there's a surround on it. I guess first thing we got to do is shut it off. There's a surround on it that pushes up. Let's see. There we go. And then pops out. That's it. It's just got these little clips welded on it, and they go into these little slots. That's it. And then you got 4 screws. As you can see, they use nice color matched ones. That's just pops out. And then it will just slide out. That's it. Then you can reach in and unplug it. And that's how you remove it. So now I'm going to take this, move it into a place with a little bit better lighting, and we're going to see what we got. Okay, so what we have is an Intertek EF-30B, which I guess is a 26-inch electric LED fireplace. It's pretty nondescript when you look at the case. One thing you will see is there are tons and tons of fasteners. There are more screws holding this thing together than you could ever imagine. And it's pretty well put together, but not necessarily so obvious as to how everything comes apart. And so I'm going to show you what I ended up doing to make it work. The first thing that I did is this top panel comes off, and you've got 3 screws here, here, and here on each side, and 2 in the back that are holding it in. And once you get those off, then you can do a little bit more work. Okay, so that's off, and that actually will give us access to the heater element, which is fairly simple. You just got a little ceramic heater here with a squirrel cage fan And the fan, this was not my squeak issue. This was never a problem. But what you also have is you got a couple of little connections here on the inside that have to be popped off of the main switch, and then this just pulls straight up off of the board. Don't do this when it's plugged into the wall. Don't ask me how I know. But okay, so after that's disconnected, and after this is unconnected, now that you have that off, you can start getting ready to remove this front face. That's glass. The face of this thing is glass, so you want to be careful when you're taking it off. But again, it is 2, 3, 4, 5 screws on each side, and I don't remember if there's any on the bottom. There are none on the bottom. So now, after having done that, and having your wires disconnected, it's a little pinched in, there it is, at the bottom, and then it comes off. Again, that is glass, so when you set it aside, be careful with it. So now we have the internal workings of it. This piece is just fixed. It is held in place by 2 slightly longer screws. Now I'll come over here. You can see all of them. This screw here is slightly longer, and there's one on the other side in the exact same spot. These are the ones that hold that log, fake log in there. They said they are slightly longer. And it's got some foam board, some little foam tape on it. But that's all this thing is. It's a cast hunk of fiberglass with some, looks like body filler and some paint on it. So once that's out, set it aside. And now we're starting to see the guts of this thing. Here's the front side of it. These LEDs are what light up the log. And they are attached to this scrim, which is in panels, or channels I should say, here. Having taken this apart the hard way, I believe the correct way to do it is to now pull the bottom off, which looks to be another 4 or 5 screws across the back. So that's what we're gonna do next. As you can see, the bottom is just recessed into it. Similar to the top. There's not a lot holding this thing together anymore, so you kind of got to be careful with it. But now what we can do, hopefully, is here and here. There are 2 screws towards the bottom on each side, and they hold this strip right here with the LEDs and the scrim on it. They hold those together. So we're going to pull that out, and then we can slide that out of the way. And now we're going to be getting closer to where I found my squeak. Finally. Okay, that's the scrim. And here's where the squeak was. This little motor with this stick with this tinfoil on it is what makes the flames look like they're rising. There are some LEDs back here that light up a little bit, and this just turns and reflects it. But the squeak was, this thing is not, it has no bearings on it, it's just sitting loose in its, container. So I just sprayed a little bit of lubricating oil on the motor and on this end, and the squeak went away. But as you can see, there's no good way to get to it if you want to lubricate it without taking all of this apart. And this is insane. And trying to get this scrim back into these slots, because they have slots all the way up at the top and everywhere else, and it's kind of flexible and annoying. Trying to do that is really, really a pain. So my thought, and what I'm going to do, is take a dimension from the case over about 1 inch, and a case over about 1 inch. You'll be able to know exactly where they are, because these are the only screws stuck in the middle on the back side. There's 2 on each side where they mount these silly brackets. And I'm going to get my sheet metal bit, and I'm just going to drill a hole in there, maybe about 3/8, ½ inch in diameter. So if it starts squeaking again, I just got to remove it from the frame, take it out of the frame, squirt a little bit of oil in it, and I'm done, rather than doing all of this. So that's my next step. So I've slid the scrim back up into its container, and there are little tiny pieces of sheet metal that make slots underneath these larger ones, and you want to try to get it in there as best you can. I missed one over there, because otherwise it's not going to sit properly. There we go. And that can be a pain. I did that in the camper the first time without taking the bottom off, and it was extremely difficult. So taking the bottom off is, if you choose to do this way, the right way to do it. And now the reassembly is simply the reverse of how it came apart. Alright, so now the next piece to go back is the log. It's got, like I said, it's got a little bit of two-sided tape on it. Okay, that's how she went. And these are the longer screws. And now we can put the fascia back on. If you'd like, now is a good time to clean the glass, if you want to, since you can get in behind it. I did that last weekend when I had it apart. And this fits inside the sidewalls, so it can get a little sticky because it's got to get pinched in there between a couple of other pieces. Once I get part of it, I could just start one screw because that'll hold it in place while I work the other side. Otherwise, you can kind of go back and forth, popping it in and out and in and out and in and out. And finally, we can put the top back on it after we carefully reconnect our wires. Plug in the flat cable to the board. There she goes. Now this piece is the worst of all because for some reason it's really warped. And it doesn't really like going back together the way it's supposed to. And you may need to get in there with a little pry bar or an actual other screwdriver, because this is what we have. You can see how this is not flush, where I've got it kind of over there. So there, if you can kind of push up on it with a screwdriver and hold it in place, maybe get this screw in here, then you might have a shot at finishing the assembly. Alright, and that is reassembled. So now she's ready to go back in, but I haven't drilled my holes in it yet. So that's what I'm going to do now. Flip this around. Try not to sever the power cord. And you can see right here and here, and there, those are the mounts for that drive thing with the tin foil on it. So if we go over about here and about here and drill a little hole, we'll be able to get in there with a spray tip of some lubricating oil periodically and lubricate these without having to take this entire thing apart. Alright, so what I'm going to use is one of these, because they're very good at drilling nice smooth holes of pretty good size in sheet metal. And this is the sheetiest of sheet metal. They're going to go right about there. Nice and easy. Same thing over here. Alright. And now we have our two starter holes. I think I'm going to take it up to about a half. And so, now, not sure if we can see it, but you can see the mechanism where you have to lubricate. So, greatly simplifying the job of making this not squeak. You can just take your little bottle of WD-40, I don't normally use WD-40 or lubricating oil, and just poof a little bit in there if it starts to squeak, and you're done. 4 screws on the outside, pull it out, put it back, put the fascia surround back on it, and you're finished. And that is my suggestion for modifying your electric fireplace so that when it starts squeaking on you, if you're using it a fair bit, you don't have to rip 357,000 screws apart in your camper, lose 12 of them, and have trouble putting that scrim back in. It's just as simple as going about an inch, maybe an inch and a half from the mounting screws in the back, maybe a ½ inch up on each side, drill a hole, and now you'll be able to lubricate them without having to worry about it. And of course, this being in the back, nobody's going to see it. So, hope that was helpful. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments. I'm always happy to answer them or see what I can do to help. Y'all take care.